Today we're going to talk about Jeremiah chapter 17, verse 9. The verse reads, "The heart is more deceitful than all else and is desperately sick. Who can understand it?" Surprisingly, the Septuagint reads, "The heart is deeper than all things. A person is also, and who will understand him?" Which two of these readings is the right reading? Today we're going to read Jeremiah 17:9 in its context. We're going to see what the root words say, what a difference vowels make, which form of the Old Testament does the New Testament prefer. Is it the Masoretic text or is it the Septuagint? We're going to look at the history behind the translation, the Dead Sea Scrolls link, and we're going to have a short aside on the revival of the Hebrew language. And we'll finally end with the conclusions of today's study. The context in both the Masoretic text and the Septuagint is the same. The preceding verses, starting from verse 7, reads, "Blessed is the man whose trust is in the Lord and whose trust is the Lord. For he will be like a tree planted by the water that extends its roots by a stream and will not fear when the heat comes, but its leaves will be green, and it will not be anxious in a year of drought, nor cease to yield fruit." Then you have verse 9, followed by, "I, the Lord, search the heart, I test the mind, even to give to each man according to his ways, according to the results of his deeds." We've got two schools of thought over here because the Masoretic text takes Jeremiah chapter 17 verse 9 and translates it completely differently from how the Septuagint translates it. We must recall that the Septuagint was translated at some time around 250 BC, that is 250 years before the incarnate Jesus Christ. The Masoretic text, on the other hand, was basically developed as a set of readings that was meant to be standardized throughout the Jewish world based on the vowel placements that were added to it, supposedly on the basis of oral tradition. There are two schools of Masoretic texts. We'll not go into that, but there are two schools of Masoretic texts, and the Biblia Hebraica Stuttgartensia largely follows one school, and that is the base for the translation of almost every English Bible that we have. So pretty much every English Bible that we have largely concentrates on utilizing the Masoretic text rather than the Septuagint. Once again, recall that the Masoretic text had its vowels added much later on. For thousands of years, the Hebrew Bible was written purely with consonants and there were no vowels. So Jeremiah 17:9, coming back to this, the crux of the matter in Jeremiah 17:9 largely lies in the translation of two words. The first word has the Hebrew base Ayin-Qof-Bet, Ayin-Qof-Bet, and if you put the vowels in one way, it reads as deceitful. If you put another set of vowels, it reads deeper. The second word that's necessary for us to look at in Jeremiah 17:9 has the Hebrew base Aleph-Nun-Shin. And here again, when you put one set of vowels, you get desperately sick. And when you put another set of vowels, you get the word man or person. So this basic difference in translation that has come about is largely because of a difference in vowels that were added between 700 and 950 AD. That's right, 700 years after the birth of Christ. At some point after 700 years is when at some point in 700 AD or thereafter is when they actually started adding vowels to the Hebrew Bible, and they finalized this set of vowel additions by about 950 AD. Now, this particular word Ayin-Qof-Bet has been translated in different ways based on different vowels that are placed next to it and around it. And Strong's Concordance has these three consonants separated because of the number of translations that's been given to it based on different vowels. And if you look at the Strong's Concordance number, it goes all the way from H6117 to H6121B. Now the meanings given to H6117 are supplant, which means to replace. It's also been given the meanings restrain, deal craftily, and take by the heel. The word supplant or to replace is used in Genesis 27 verse 36. The other meanings are used in Job 37 verse 4, Jeremiah 9 4, and Hosea 12 3. Jeremiah 9 4 is the single instance in the Bible where this word is used to mean deceitful or to deal craftily. H6118 has been translated as because, which means as a result of, a reward or end. And this is used in the following verses: Genesis 22 verse 18, 26 verse 5, Numbers 14 verse 24, Deuteronomy 7 verse 12, 8 verse 20, 2 Samuel 12 verse 6, 12 verse 10, Psalm 19 verse 11, 40 verse 15, 70 verse 3, 119 verse 33, 119 verse 112, Proverbs 22 4, and Amos 4:12. H6119 is translated as heel, hoofs, rear guard, steps, footsteps, and trail. This is used in Genesis 3:15, 25 verse 26, 49 verse 17, 49 verse 19, Joshua 8 verse 3, Judges 5 verse 22, Job 18 verse 9, Psalm 41 verse 9, Psalm 56 verse 6, Psalm 77 verse 19, 89 verse 51, Song of Solomon 1 verse 8, Jeremiah 13 verse 22. H6120 is translated as foes and is used in Psalm 49 verse 5. H6121A is translated as tract in Hosea 6 verse 8, and in Jeremiah 17 verse 9 it is translated as deceitful according to the Masoretic text. H6121B is translated as rough ground in Isaiah 40 verse 4. So is the word deceitful or deep? Ayin-Qof-Bet is the Hebrew base. Jeremiah 9:4 is the only passage in scripture where the Hebrew term is understood to mean deceitful or to deal craftily. I just want to bring to mind once again that the word supplant does not necessarily mean deceitful. Supplant simply means to supersede and to replace. The assumption of deceitfulness is not inherent in the word supplant. Jeremiah himself uses the term Ayin-Qof-Bet two more times, once in chapter 13 verse 22 and again in chapter 17 verse 9, which is the subject of our study. So when you're looking at just what Jeremiah wrote, the three places that he uses this word Ayin-Qof-Bet is in chapter 9 verse 4, chapter 13 verse 22, and chapter 17 verse 9. So how did the Septuagint get the term deep from Ayin-Qof-Bet? The three consonants of the Hebrew word Ayin-Qof-Bet is commonly translated into English as because or reward or end, the implication being a cause or an as a result of behind the purpose. In the context of Jeremiah chapter 17 verses 7 to 10, the context suggests that while the intents of a man's heart are too hidden to be drawn out by men, God is not constrained in his ability to understand and reveal the intents of men's hearts. Let's go on to the second word. The difference in translation, once again because of different vowels added in between 700 AD and 950 AD. Here the word is the Hebrew base Aleph-Nun-Shin, And the Strong's Concordance here again has the word translated based on different vowels as H605, and it means sick, incurable, desperately sick, or woeful. And these meanings are seen in 2 Samuel 12:15, Job 34:6, Isaiah 17:11, Jeremiah 15 verse 18, Jeremiah 17 verse 9, Jeremiah 17 verse 16, Jeremiah 30 verse 12, Jeremiah 30 verse 15, and Micah 1 verse 9. On the other hand, the next word in the Strong's Concordance is H606, using the same three Hebrew consonants, and the meaning here is man. Here the references are Ezekiel chapter 4 verse 11, chapter 6 verse 11, Daniel chapter 2 verse 10, 2 verse 38, 2 verse 43, 3 verse 10, 4 verse 16, 4 verse 17, 4 verse 25, 4 verse 32, 4 verse 33, 5 verse 5, 5 verse 7, 5 verse 21, 6 verse 7, 6 verse 12, 7 verse 4, 7 verse 8, and 7 verse 13. So once again, how does the Septuagint get the term man? Simply because there are other places in the Bible where the same three Hebrew consonants are translated as man. The only other instance where the three consonants of the Hebrew Aleph-Nun-Shin is used with the word heart in the same verse is in Daniel chapter 5 verse 21, and there the Hebrew word occurs twice and is translated mankind twice. I want you to hear this again. The only other instance where the three consonants of the Hebrew term Aleph-Nun-Shin is used along with the word heart in the same verse is in Daniel chapter 5 verse 21, and there the Hebrew word occurs twice and is translated mankind twice. In the context of Jeremiah chapter 17 verses 7 to 10, it is quite evident that it is the intent of man's heart that is hidden, and that can only be revealed by God. So what about the New Testament connection? There are about 283 to about 300 quotations of the Old Testament in the New. Of these, there are differences between the Masoretic text and the Septuagint at least 99 times. So out of about 283 to 300 quotations of the Old Testament in the New, there's a difference between the Masoretic text and the Septuagint 99 times. And in 90 out of 99 times, the New Testament quotes the Septuagint. When there is a variance, the New Testament writers prefer the Septuagint over the Masoretic text 91% of the time. 90 out of 99 times makes it 91% of the time. As regards the book of Jeremiah, the New Testament authors prefer the Septuagint over the Masoretic text 100% of the time. The historical thread. For 400 years after the church was established, almost all of Christendom used the Greek Septuagint for the Old Testament. While the Western Church, Rome and Alexandria, moved on to using the Hebrew Masoretic text plus the Deuterocanonicals because Jerome translated the Latin Vulgate from the Hebrew Masoretic text, the Eastern Church, largely in Constantinople, continued to use the Greek Septuagint. About 700 AD, two schools of Masoretes developed, the Ben Asher line and the Ben Naphtali line. They began to add vowels to the Tanakh, that is the Old Testament. Tanakh is short for Torah, Nevi'im, and Ketuvim. Torah means the law, Nevi'im means the prophets, and Ketuvim means the writings. So you take the first letter of all three, you put them together, it's what's called the Tanakh or the Old Testament according to us Christians. Now the Masoretes, both schools, both the Ben Asher line and the Ben Naphtali line, they started adding vowels to the text that they had about 700 AD. And this vowel addition was finalized by about 950 AD. Right? Now, that is how the Masoretic text came about. one of the oldest Masoretic texts that we have with us today is dated to almost 1000 AD. Now look at this. The addition of vowels by the Masoretes was started by 700 AD and finalized by 950 AD. And the oldest Masoretic text that we have translated almost all of our Bibles from, the Old Testament in all of our English Bibles from, comes from a text that is dated to 1000 AD or thereabouts. Now, the Protestants broke away from the Roman Catholic Church, and because of this, many of the traditions that were followed were things that were subconsciously or knowingly, but they didn't think there was much wrong about it. It was just carried over from the Roman Catholic Church. And so, as a result of this, the Protestants continue to use the Hebrew text. Now, there is a reason why we continue to use the Hebrew text. The original language of the Old Testament was in Hebrew, and the Greek Septuagint is a translation of the original Hebrew. So it only makes sense that if there is a difference between the two texts, that you would go with the Hebrew text, because that is the older text. And this made sense until the 1940s. Until the 1940s, scholars had consigned the Septuagint to a secondary status, because the Greek Septuagint translation was thought to be a sloppy and dynamic translation because of the presumption that the Hebrew Masoretic text was the Vorlage, or the foundational Hebrew text family from which the Septuagint was translated. However, from the time the Dead Sea Scrolls was discovered, it became clear that the Septuagint was translated from a different Vorlage, and that translation is a literal translation of this other Vorlage and is reliable. It has also become clear from the Dead Sea Scrolls that the Septuagint is translated from an older Vorlage than the Masoretic text. If you get your hands on some of the scholarly work of the Dead Sea Scrolls and you read about the various Vorlages that are there, it's largely two. You have what is called the Proto-Masoretic texts, and you have what is called the Proto-Septuagint texts. And it's clear from our discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls that the Septuagint is a literal and reliable translation of one Vorlage of the Hebrew manuscripts. What I mean to say is, the Dead Sea Scrolls have shown Hebrew texts that is the parent of the Septuagint which we have today. Hebrew texts that do not correlate with the Masoretic texts, but Hebrew texts that correlate with the Septuagint that we have today. And this is why it's become clear from the Dead Sea Scrolls that the Septuagint is translated from an older Vorlage than the Masoretic text. I'd like to go to an aside now and talk about two men behind the revival of the Hebrew language in modern times. The one that almost everyone will know about is a man called Eliezer ben Yehuda. He lived from 1858 to 1922. He believed that Hebrew, the language Hebrew, could unite Jews worldwide. And so he raised his son Ben Zion ben Yehuda to be the first native Hebrew speaker in over 1,000 years. He worked on the first Hebrew dictionary that was fully published in 1960. Eliezer ben Yehuda died in 1922. He had published some of it bit by bit, but though he died in 1922, the work continued on the first Hebrew dictionary, and that was fully published in 1960. The second man behind the revival of the Hebrew language is someone that most people would not have heard of. He's called Naphtali Herz Sinai. Naphtali Herz Sinai lived from 1886 to 1973. He was a Bible scholar, a linguist, a professor of Semitic languages at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. He was the first president of the Academy of the Hebrew Language, and he was the founder of the Historical Dictionary Project. Why I am interested in Naphtali Herz Sinai is because this man, who was instrumental in the revival of the Hebrew language, also translated the Tanakh, the Old Testament, into German. I was interested in seeing how he would have translated Jeremiah chapter 17 verse 9. So if you're interested in his work, you can find it. It's a book called Die Heilige Schrift, which means the Holy Scriptures, by Naphtali Herz Sinai. Jeremiah 17 verse 9. I'm not going to read the German because I don't know how to. But the translated version of Jeremiah 17 verse 9 reads, "Hidden more than anything, the heart is incomprehensible. Who knows?" So Naphtali Herz Sinai, who was instrumental in reviving the Hebrew language, translates Jeremiah 17:9 in keeping with the Septuagint, just by looking at the same Hebrew consonants that are available in Hebrew Bibles all over the world today, without getting biased by the vowel pointings that were put in there. To conclude, in line with the findings of our study of the Hebrew in Jeremiah chapter 17 verse 9, the weightage given to the Septuagint by the New Testament authors, especially as regards Jeremiah, the historical thread of vowel point additions being as late as 700 AD to 950 AD, the Bible Society's Old Testament tradition being largely Masoretic text based or Masoretic text biased, the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls and the new insights they gave us, and Naphtali Herz Sinai's Die Heilige Schrift, a man instrumental in the revival of the Hebrew language, we see that the Septuagint is the faithful translation of Jeremiah 17 verse 9. So instead of reading Jeremiah 17 verse 9 as "the heart is more deceitful than all else and is desperately sick, who can understand it?" we should be reading Jeremiah 17 verse 9 as "the heart is deeper than all things, a person is also, and who will understand him?"